Welcome to this explainer. Today we're heading straight to the shores of the Bosphorus to uncover the dramatic story of the late Ottoman Empire's absolute grandest architectural masterpiece, the Çirağan Palace. To really wrap our heads around this place, we've got to start with its name. Çirağan comes from Persian and it translates beautifully to light, torch, or festival of lights. You see, long before those massive stone walls were ever built, this exact plot of land was famous for glowing spectacles, starting way back in the early 18th century. Okay, let's dive into this, because the history here is just wildly vivid. Back during the famous Tulip era, the Grand Vizier hosted these legendary evening parties, known as Çirağan Sofra. Just picture this. Guests are wandering through lush imperial gardens at night, and they're being guided by the glow of hundreds of actual living turtles, slowly roaming the grounds with illuminated candles gently attached to their backs. No way, right? It was this completely surreal, highly sensory experience that permanently tied the concept of light to this location. Here's our roadmap for this explainer. First, origin and historical development. Second, the Balian family and architectural synthesis. Third, engineering marvel and fine craftsmanship. Fourth, sections of the palace and living areas. And lastly, historical crises and cultural heritage. All right, let's get into Section 1, Origin of the Name and Historical Development. So while earlier sultans favored wooden palaces on the shore for decades, it was actually Sultan Abdul Aziz who ordered the monumental permanent stone structure that we know today. And this brilliantly illustrates the sheer turbulence of the palace's lifespan. We see construction kicking off by tearing down the old wooden structures in 1863, with the Grand Stone Palace officially completed in 1871. But its time as a rural residence was shockingly short-lived. By 1909, with the Second Constitutional Era, boom, it's transformed into the Ottoman Parliament. Then, just one single year later, a devastating fire strikes. It literally sat as a ruined shell for decades, until an extensive restoration in the late 1980s finally brought it back as a hotel complex. It's this incredibly rapid, dizzying shift from absolute majesty to total ruin. Moving right along to Section 2, the Balian family and architectural synthesis. The brilliant minds who actually brought this stone giant to life were the legendary Balian family. Chief architect Nikos Balian led the primary design, heavily supported by his brothers Sarkis and Agop. But they didn't do it alone. They collaborated closely with European and Levantine engineers, plus master craftsmen. What they pulled off together was a breathtaking East meets West dichotomy. Look at the exterior, and it's heavily Western, Baroque and neoclassical symmetrical facades, monumental lines, classic column capitals. But then look closer, at the window arches, the intricate indoor latticework, the geometric designs, and you see the East, stunning Moorish or Andalusian and classical Ottoman motifs. This wasn't just a random design choice. This architecture perfectly mirrored the Ottoman Empire's own profound cultural transition and westernization during the 19th century. Up next, Section 3, Engineering Marvel and Fine Craftsmanship. Let's zoom in from the macro architecture to the micro details, because the sheer opulence of the materials here is staggering. We're talking first-class marble imported straight from Italy, shining right alongside local Marmara marble. The master carpentry featured doors intricately inlaid with mother-of-pearl, ebony, ivory, and even tortoiseshell. If you had walked these halls before the fire, you would have looked up to see ceilings literally dripping in gold leaf, illuminated by massive crystal chandeliers and covered in custom oil paintwork by specialized European artists. So the crucial point is the context in which all of this was built. There's a really severe financial irony here. This incredibly costly, glittering marvel of art and engineering was constructed right smack in the middle of a massive financial crisis for the Ottoman treasury. The empire was struggling under immense economic pressure, yet they still poured vast, highly expensive resources into creating this ultimate, shining symbol of power and wealth. But it wasn't just a display of wealth. It was highly advanced for its time. The engineers integrated mechanical ventilation channels throughout the whole structure. They designed a complex network of hidden quarters so servants could move around completely unseen. It even featured luxurious marble bath systems, or hammams, with advanced mechanical heating, plus hydraulic systems that actually pulled and utilized seawater directly from the Bosphorus. How cool is that? Let's transition to Section 4, Sections of the Palace and Living Areas. I want to invite you on a quick virtual walking tour through this massive complex, which sprawls extensively right along the Bosphorus shoreline. The floor plan itself was essentially a physical map of the empire's societal hierarchy. First, you've got the Selamlik, featuring monumental marble stairs and the grandest doors. This was the main stage for official state affairs and receiving foreign diplomats. Next up is the harem, a highly private, lush living area for the sultan's family, gazing right out over the sea. Tucked away in more modest structures was the Oglar Diarcy, which housed the servants and guards. And fascinatingly, there was the Marble Bridge. This was a secure, high-walled structure built a bit later by Sultan II, Abdul Hamid, giving him safe, direct access from the inland Yildiz Palace down to the shore whenever he wanted. Now, imagine stepping outside into the grand exterior. You'd find hundreds of meters of pristine Bosphorus pier, specifically designed so the Sultan's magnificent imperial boats, the Sultanat Kaylıklar, could dock directly at the palace. The grounds were just packed with lush gardens, boasting rare plants and soothing fountains, all enclosed by these monumental, intricately carved stone gates. In fact, the historical Çirağan Gate on the land side still stands today as one of the finest examples of Moorish stonework in the entire world. And that brings us to Section 5, Historical Crises and Cultural Heritage. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the sheer claustrophobia behind this number, 28. That's the number of years Sultan V. Murad lived in this palace in forced, isolated captivity after being deposed due to alleged mental instability. Just think about that for a second. This sprawling, beautiful, highly advanced living space effectively became a gilded cage for nearly 3 decades of a man's life, cutting him off entirely from the outside world. And then we hit the tragic climax of our story. On January 19, 1910, a massive fire, which most believe started from a simple electrical short, tore through the structure. In a flash, the grand interiors, the priceless historical archives, and the majestic library were completely reduced to ashes. The outer stone walls were literally the only things that survived. It sat ruined and desolate for decades, until a massive restoration project in the 1980s finally revived it. They meticulously rebuilt the stone architecture and transformed the grounds into the Kempinski luxury hotel complex that stands there today, hosting world leaders and international celebrities. Which leaves us with this final thought. These walls witnessed overthrown sultans, a 28-year captivity, and totally devastating fires. After all of that history, how does it remain such a prestigious symbol today?